Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome you all to the Governance and Resources meeting to be held here at Town Hall, Matlock, on the 11th of July. We're not expecting any fire drills, or so if the alarm does go off, then please make your way out calmly out of the closest exits you can, and we meet up on the car park at the top. Okay, thank you. Move on to item 1, apologies.
Yes, Chair, we've received apologies from councillors Cruz, Flitter and Hobson, and attending as substitute is Councillor Gamble.
Item. Sorry. Oh, okay.
Excuse me, I didn't send apologies for this meeting.
I'm just.
Well, the apologies haven't been notified, then Councillor Cruz will take his seat in the committee as the prime member of this committee. It's Councillor Campbell substituting Councillor Cruz.
Yeah, substituting Councillor Flitter.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think we're quorum.
So, Caroline, you can take seats on the end, and Councillor Cruz can take a seat on the end here.
Okay, move on to item 2. Approval of the minutes of the previous meeting, this being on the 28th of February 2019. Do I find a proposer, please? Councillor Mike Ratliff, you propose? Oh, sorry.
Either way, Chair, either way.
It's been proposed by Councillor Purdy, seconded by Councillor Ratliff. All in favour? Item 3, public participation. Have we got any members of the public? I don't believe we have. Have we got any notifications? No. Item 4, interests. Have anybody got any declarable interests on any matters arising? Nothing to declare? Thank you. Item 5. Questions. Answer question for members. Have any members got any questions? No? Item 6. We move on to Equality, Consultation and Engagement Plan 2019-20. We are here to receive an update report on the progress against the actions set out in the Equality, Consultation Engagement Plan, and consider approval for the Equalities, Consultation and Engagement Plan for 1920. I will move to Officer Mr. Capes to give us any update and report and read with this.
Chairman, thank you very much indeed. So for the benefit of all members, particularly new ones, this is an annual report that we bring to you. It is a summary, so it is in effect a summary of the equality and consultation work the District Council has done over the last year, and again a summary of what's happening next year. Detailed reports on consultation and equalities issues do accompany any policy decisions that members are asked to make. So for instance, when you made the key decision on the waste collection contract last November, you had 90 pages of consultation report going with that and another 10 pages on equalities. So that's the forum where the detailed information goes. This is just a summary to put it all together. As I'm sure members are acutely aware, that we do have statutory duties with regard to consultation and indeed duties with regard to equalities as well. In both cases, though, as a district council, we aim to not be a slave to the law, but try and use it for good and for the benefits of good decision making by you as members. We have a proportionate approach, and we try and link our work on consultation and equalities to the decisions you need to make and also to the objectives in your corporate plan. So, for instance, one of the aims in the report in front of you was to improve housing for vulnerable people. That's a key aim of the council, and you'll see that from an equalities point of view, we set a target last year that we would provide debt and welfare advice to 250 people. In fact, through Rob Coggins' team, it was something like 450 people that were helped in that way. We had a target to provide adaptations to disabled people who needed their homes to be adapted. 70 people was the target. In fact, 66 were adapted, which is actually higher than in any previous year, but still not quite the target level. And for consultation, we use a variety of different methods. Some of you will have had the pleasure of no doubt being consulted by us in the past. We use online methods, we have face-to-face, we have postal, and we have telephone as well. In fact, we've recently concluded a telephone survey with regards to the corporate plan, which those of you who come to the corporate plan workshop next week will see all the results of that. So the only thing I would add to this is, in terms of consultation and engagement and equality officer, I have a 0.2 post, which is a lady who works on Mondays. Some of you will already have met Lynn, who did the equalities training, the mandatory equalities training last Monday. Those of you who haven't yet will soon be doing when you get to do that mandatory equalities training. Thank you, Chair.
Are there any questions? Yes, Councillor Electoral.
Thank you very much, Chair. As this is the first meeting of the Governance and Resources Committee for this newly formed council, I'm sure all members will be aware that this is one of the major policy committees, and of course we're under a new chair, and I welcome you to this very important forum, as I say, and I look forward to constructive debate and the implementation of beneficial outcomes and recommendations under your guidance. I'm sure you will give us good chairmanship. I'd like to use, if you will allow me, this particular report to mention some of the broader issues of equality under this council. I thought it was very interesting that this should be the first item, as it were, on this committee, following the recent...
Can I just...
questions.
It is a question.
Yes,
It
sorry.
is a question. I just happened to be giving you a preamble.
Can we...
to questions, please.
Oh, right. I'm sorry, I didn't realise you want to leap straight to a question.
Yes, please.
However, okay, my question then, because this is about equality, and we recently had the members' development training on this, that clearly I think everybody would appreciate this is not about just simply about service users, but it's always also about the workforce here. I'd like to feel that at some point you could supply me with some figures on the employment rates in particular categories that fall under this particular policy of equality, discrimination, etc. For example, the number of disabled people that we are employing. You mentioned one of them. How many, for instance, black and Asian members do we employ? Just to give us some sort of baseline so that we can, at some point, start to look at how we can improve, perhaps, the way that we conduct our discrimination and inequality. So that's essentially is my question. Some sort of feedback on the figures that our employment related to these areas.
Chairman, if I may, workforce equality data was published on the 31st of January. We have to publish it every year. amongst the equality information we publish. There's a link to it at the bottom of page 5 of your report. It's available on our website. Just one quick bit of information: people with a declared disability make up 6.2% of our workforce.
Thank you. Councillor Slack. Question, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's question. My question is Appendix
Can
1.
you put your mic on and really
Oh,
close?
sorry, Chair. My question is on Appendix 1, Objective 1, business growth and job creation. I noticed it's in the red. It's the young people under 25 that aren't coming in, starting their own businesses. Could it be a fact, my question is, could it be a fact that the uncertainty is being created with Brexit and growth in the economy is a factor in the jobs not being, these people haven't got the confidence to start businesses? It must play a part in it. Is that correct, sir?
Chairman, as far as I know, that's not the case. The information we have is that the reason that young people haven't been starting new businesses is that they've in fact been taking up other jobs that have been available. There's very low unemployment in the Derbyshire Dales, so there have been jobs available, so it's perhaps easier for them to take up job opportunities that are already there rather than trying to create their own.
And they feel safer to take a job and rather than start a business. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Purdy.
It's not a question, Chair. Unless questions are finished, I'm happy to move to debate.
Question? Councillor Raw?
Just a quick question. I just wondered if we've got any members of the staff that were dementia friends, or if that was something we could look at promoting in the future, given that we've got quite, from the data, quite significant elderly population, and be happy to get on board with that if that's something you're interested in.
Chairman, I don't know the answer to that. I'm sure our HR manager will be very interested in helping with that. We certainly have mental health first aid champions and a whole range of staff trained in lots of ways, so I think that would be something I'd certainly talk to our head of HR about.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Cruz.
Hello, thanks very much for the reports. The question was around the need. So you said provide adaptation supposed to 70 disabled people. What's the sort of scale of the need? That's the kind of bottom up target, 66 versus 70. Any ideas?
Chairman, in previous years it's always been around 50 or so that come through. Whether that's a reflection of need or a reflection of the grants that are available is a different matter. The grants are provided partly by us and partly by the County Council. It's sort of a joint effort. The grants have increased, which is why the numbers of adaptations did increase last year. I think our head of regulatory services would say that whilst we expected the demand to increase, it didn't increase as much as was expected.
Are there any more questions? Thank you. Councillor Purdy.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, there's an awful lot of work goes on by the authority behind this report, and it does seem to be a report that you simply should nod through, but it's good to have questions. There seems to be no more questions. I'm happy with the reports. I'm happy to move it, Chair.
Does it find a second?
It does, Chair.
But I think it deserves a little more comment, if you don't mind. I realise that this is very much about the engagement consultation plan, and specifically it's telling us what consultation and engagement activities are proposed each year. So I understand that, but I can't get away from the fact that it's integral to the policy on equality. And I have to say, I was reminded the other day when we had our member training about the difficulties that are presented to officers in formulating equality assessments. They seem to be understandably but regrettably constrained by financial factors. And I have to say, if we're going to be strongly proactive on equality and discrimination, we have to somehow throw off those shackles and actually concentrate on what is meaningful for equality and discrimination. And I'll give you one very good example, if I may. that of the toilet public convenient closure question that again inevitably got debated or discussed under questions when we had the training. The second one is that of the car park. Now, nobody can deny that there was strong favourable reception from disabled groups over the charging of car park fees. However, what wasn't taken into consideration was how these disabled users were actually going to make that charge. And I just felt, again, at that time, that there should have been a wider dissemination of information and the presentation of alternatives for them, so that those who cannot, for one reason or another, access usefully use the machines, whether it be coins or indeed cards, have an alternative. So I think we have to look very closely at that. And the point was made very much and very strongly again about the public convenience closures, though I know we're not going to go into that now, and I certainly don't want to. The fact that there were very strong inherent discrimination issues underlying those closures, but actually they weren't strong. They did not strongly emerge on the equalities assessment that was presented. So I just make at that point. No doubt we'll be returning to it when we next look at the policy in general. But you know, I accept this. It's a good report, contained as it is and constrained within its parameters of presentation on the information that we're being given. So, I mean, I thank you for that, Steve.
Thank you. If I may just clarify one point, I suppose for the benefit of new members, the statutory duty with equalities is that members have to have regard to equalities issues.
Yes.
So it's our job to put them to you with all the pros and cons, and you have to have regard to them. But ultimately, the decision you make will be constrained by, well, it will be constrained by resources. I mean, as an example, for say disability issues, the requirement is to make reasonable adjustments. It's not to make all adjustments, it's to make reasonable adjustments, and you know, that's, we would be as reasonable as possible. And as a council, we, you know, I think previous members will know that we try and do our utmost where we can, but we do operate under constraints.
Councillor Raw.
It's just a quick question in relation to Councillor Fitton's comments. I just wondered, in relation to housing adaptations, how much of existing council stock and housing association stock do we manage to re-tenant rather than have to go through the costs of re-adaptations? So what I'm talking about is if you've got somebody elderly who's had conversion to a wet room because of a disability, do we have policies in place and make efforts to ensure that somebody else goes into that property so that that wet room doesn't have to be ripped out, so that money's not wasted? And is that part of why we're not meeting the target? Is it because we're getting smarter at that? I think it'd be useful perhaps next year to perhaps think about how we can look at that and think about whether we can report on that.
Thank you. Rob, would you like to comment on that?
Yes, I can take that, Chair, thank you. All of the properties, when they become vacant in the social housing stock, all those owned by housing associations, are advertised on Home Options, our choice-based technical scheme. And that carries with it various little graphics which tell you how energy efficient the property is, what adaptations have been made, etc. So you can, looking at the different levels of adaptation, people will be expected to bid who have the needs for those properties. The difficulty is, of course, when you have a property that becomes available with a certain adaptation in it, there isn't somebody at that moment in time who perhaps has the needs that match that property. So there is a bit of a grey area there which we're trying to ensure is is reduced because housing associations can't keep properties vacant. The more generic thing we're trying to do is build more properties to effectively the lifetime bonus standards, providing bungalows from the beginning which are already adapted or to different levels, and the building regulations have changed to reflect that. So we do put a lot of effort in trying to match the right properties with the right people. And as you say, we don't want to be ripping out expensive adaptations that we've worked in the past.
And do we measure that? Is that something we measure and benchmark against other local authorities? How are we doing it on that sort of area?
I don't think we measure that per se. I mean, we can produce reports on from the home auction system which shows what was advertised and who was let to. So I'm happy to, outside the meeting, find out if we can do that for you.
Thank you, Rob, for that. Okay, it's been moved and seconded for recommendations 1 and 2 on your agenda. All in favour? Item 7. Derbyshire Dales District Council Electoral Review.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'll take this item. The report informs members that the Local Government Boundary Commission for England have informed the Council that because of electoral imbalances, the Commission has identified the Council as requiring a further electoral review. The report outlines the details of that review and the process that we will be following. And to give context to this, paragraph 1.4 in the table attached there gives an indication of those particular wards which, on electoral numbers of December 2017, appear to show the greatest imbalances, be that a 10% variance above or 10% below. The remainder of the report, as I say, sets out the review timetable. It is a timetable which is largely dictated by the Commission themselves. And members will see that in paragraph 2.2, the preliminary stages of this are outlined, and effectively the 25th of July, prior to the council meeting that evening, is going to be used as a briefing session for staff, group leaders, for the full council. And then in parallel, there will be also a parish and town council briefing. I need to correct the report. It says 7 p.m. for that briefing for parish and town councils on the 25th. It should actually read 6 p.m. So we will make sure that the appropriate time is communicated to them. In terms of the final recommendations, once the process has been concluded, they're expected in August of 2020, and implementation of the new electoral wards with Derbyshire Dales would take effect from the 2023 District Council elections. I'll just take questions, Chair.
Councillor Swindle.
Thank you, Chair. First question, can I ask, this is purely looking at district council wards. This is having nothing to do with parish council boundaries. Thank you. And my second question, obviously we don't want to get into the ins and outs of what may or may not occur now, because this is just agreeing the process. But part of the agenda item that stood out to me was that the council will formulate its own response and so on. How, as a council, are we going to show and make sure that members don't act with sort of self-interest? And that sounds like a sticky sort of question, but it's like MPs voting to reduce the number of MPs. Obviously they have their own interests, they don't want to do it because they may lose their seat, or a certain political party maybe it's a disadvantage. How is the council going to make sure our members are acting impartially and not with their own interests at heart?
Well, this whole process is going to be overseen by the Head of Corporate Services, Sandra Lamb, who clearly has to act with a degree of impartiality in the interests of the council, and that will be done. But primarily, the Commission don't have to accept the District Council's proposals. We will formulate proposals, and they will come through the normal committee and council channels for prior approval before they get submitted. But effectively, the Commission will in parallel formulate their own assessment that will take into account our views, and then being the independent body will ultimately determine whether they agree with our proposals or not. So we will suggest what we think is appropriate for Derbyshire Dales, but by no means do we have the final say.
Councillor Sly.
My first question is, wards like Wordsworth, Ashburn South and Dublin, which have a higher number of voters per councillor, will these wards could be judged as to have additional councillors? And wards, and part of this second question is similar really, wards where there's a lower number of voters in wards, is it possible that neighbouring wards could be joined together and lose the councillors in some respect?
Well, that's exactly the process that we need to go through to look at those types of issues and make appropriate decisions. There's an important principle behind all of this, that each vote must have equal value. So we need to get as close as possible to a scenario whereby that is replicated across the whole of the district. So effectively we'll start with a blank piece of paper. We will look at the existing boundaries clearly, we'll be influenced by those, we'll be influenced by the actual way the district functions, particularly relative to parish boundaries. But ultimately we need to come up with a new map which indicates that voters are represented on an equal basis across the whole of Derbyshire Dales wherever possible. Now that may result in some changes, but it's far too soon to say what they may be.
My last question is, will parish councils have consultation with in part of this?
Yes, they will.
With the Boundary Commission. Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Chair. With respect to paragraph 2.5, data for review, that notes there are three wards, Clifton, Bradley, Wordsworth, Derbyshire and Sudbury, where the planning applications are going to result in an increase in the population. However, if you look at the local plan, local development plan, between now and 2030, Ashbourne and Matlock are going to have a significant increase in housing if it goes according to if the planning applications and development go according to the plan. And I estimate that in Matlock itself there will be some 2,000 houses in just 2 developments, and one of those developments, if it goes ahead, would result in a 20% increase in the Matlock All Saints ward population, and that would put Matlock All Saints into a red category, whereas at the moment it's shown as being okay. So my question is, will the review take account of the local development plan and act according to that, in addition to those applications that have already been put in place?
Yes, it will. The table at paragraph 4.4 clearly reflects elector rolls at December 2017. Clearly there has been significant changes since then. There will be even greater changes, and part of the review requires us to look forward to those developments which we anticipate will come to completion, in order to make sure that as soon as we complete this electoral review, it effectively is future-proofed to a degree against those changes in development plan allocations.
Councillor Rattle.
Thank you, Chair. A quick question. I am capable of it occasionally. Is this basically a numbers game?
No, I don't think it is. It's a numbers game insofar as making sure that we have equal voter representation as far as possible. But there are many other considerations to be taken into account in the delineation of these boundaries. It's an exercise which does have to have regard to the parishes and the way that they function, and that we don't end up with situations whereby we're dividing parishes, wherever that can be avoided. So it's taken into account a series of considerations. That's why the engagement of town and parish councils is important. But ultimately, we do need to come up with a solution which meets the Commission's criteria.
Thank you. I will quickly just come back. I appreciate your answer, because I think it sums up exactly what my thoughts are. This district is about more than just demographics. It's about the geography too of this district, and to see that those disparate communities are well representative, even given the distance between them. Not only that, of course, I think what this is presenting with us is a review, if you like, of what we want this council to be come 2030, when we have these housing expansions. And I think we've got to look at that too. What sort of, how what constituency do we want this council to operate under? So thank you for your answer.
Councillor Purdy.
I must confess, Chair, when I read the report, like Councillor Hughes, I was surprised that only those 3 parishes being named in the housing stock, given the fact that since 8 years ago I became Chair of Planning, we've approved an awful lot of housing. So I had to confess to struggling with this somewhat, and the imminence of the government officers coming to see us, with the lack of information. The information we've got is this 1,470 constituents per councillor, but I've got no map to show where all that demographic is. And I've got knowledge of where the planning housing has gone in, but I think it would be helpful as well if we could all have a sight of where those numbers goes on, because as Councillor Ratcliffe says, there's a geographic perspective to this, but there's enormous impact in some very small areas as well, with massive increased housing stock. So this is a fairly difficult mathematical, complex geographical puzzle to plot down on paper.
Sorry, Chair, just a quick point of order. There shouldn't be any speeches until it's been proposed and seconded. And I didn't want to interject with the 2 members, but I take it we've now moved to the debate section. So could I ask to get with the procedure that we have a proposer and seconder of the...
Thank you, Lee. I should have framed that as a question. I realised, but basically the tenet of the thing I was making was that the question was, why was it not put in the report with all the housing stock and numbers, not just those 3 wards?
Well, because there is no single data set at the moment which predicts what the outcome is. That's part of the work of the review team that we need to look at. So there are a number of issues we need to take into account, including developments which are in the course of development now, completions that have taken place since 2017. There's the local plan allocations, there's the planning applications which are in the system and will be determined within this timescale. So part of the review team's job is to look at all of that information and predict what we think the growth in population may be in certain areas. Now, the reason why only those ones have been identified and not Ashbourne, for example, is because we already know that Ashbourne needs to be looked at. Even if no more development takes place, Ashbourne is already an area which is not compliant with the criteria. And what we've identified is the areas whereby that might not be the case at the moment, but we predict it will be because of that local plan situation. So if you take Clifton and Bradley, for example, at the moment it looks fine, minus 1.2%, but we know it won't be because the development is taking place. And the same for the other areas that are listed. So we will look at the whole of the district, but there are clearly pressure points which we know will need review, even if on balance they don't appear to need that review now.
Thank you, Paul. In that case, I'm prepared to move the recommendations.
Before we go on to remove it, I'd like to ask another question. And also, I'd like to point out to Mr. Wilson that Matlock or Sames would be in the same category as the 3 listed here. Not only wards in Ashbourne, it's only Ashbourne South that is mentioned as a red area in the table. Therefore, my question is, can we amend section 2.5 to include the areas of Matlock where there is likely to be growth, and make reference to the local development plan and the impact on housing and population that will result from the implementation of that plan, since that is not in section 2.5, not mentioned in section 2.5 at the moment. And I can't see that I can support this plan until we have those things in there.
Well, paragraph 2.5 is not listing the only wards that will be subject to review. Every single ward across the district will be subject to review. Effectively, we will start with a blank piece of paper. We will remove all of the existing ward boundaries, and the exercise is to look at the population as it stands, look at the predicted population growth, and then devise new ward boundaries. So every single ward will be looked at, not just the ones that
Can I ask therefore why 3 wards have been singled out in section 2.5 if it's irrelevant to the plan or the proposed method of working?
For the reasons that I've stated, that if you look at Clifton and Bradley, at the moment paragraph 1.4 says that it's minus 1.2%. On the predictions of development within that particular ward, we can say now that that will exceed 10%.
Then in that
You
case-
couldn't necessarily say the same for Matlock All Saints, which is minus 1.6.
Right, Councillor Hughes, can you please, we're not having a bat and ball across the table, okay? You've asked questions, you've asked 3 questions now. This, at the end of the day, is a timeline report of how the process is going to be put in place, and I think if you've read it properly, we are coming back on the 25th of July to fully discuss it. So I feel that some of the questions that you've been asked and going on as regards debating upon will be covered when we all get round the table to discuss your issues as well as many of the other members' issues of their wards. So from that, Councillor Purdy, did you move?
Second.
So I've got a seconder. Councillor Morley, do you want to speak on that?
Not really, because I'm sure that, as Paul has said, each of the wards will be taken into account. We've all got business development on my mind, planning development in our areas, which will make a difference. But I'm confident that all this will be taken into account.
So we'll move to the debate. Councillor Stoll.
Thank you, Chair. Just one recommendation. I understand Councillor Hughes' concerns, but I'm content with reading the report in full that paragraph 2.5 is really just an example of how things will be dealt with if there's going to be huge housing increases in the future rather than an exception.
Councillor Swindle.
Thank you, Chair. I did say before I asked the questions earlier that we're just agreeing a timeline here tonight, and I think we're all jumping the gun and asking very detailed questions before the review has even started, before the whistle's even been blown. And I do understand that some of these questions will come forward, but right now we don't have the full facts before us, and as our Chief Executive said, we're going to start with a blank sheet, and I actually welcome this review. I think it is needed, and I don't say it because I'm concerned that some councillors have got harder work than others. That's not just about electorate numbers, that's about where you live and the issues that are in your area. But I think this is primarily about fairness for the electorate, making sure that they are adequately represented and that the communities are as well. So when we go forward, I think my plea to members will be that we think about the electorate, not ourselves, and make sure that our communities are well served as well, making sure that those communities that have close links to each other, that feel akin to each other, as best we can, remain within those district boundary wards where they sit together. Yeah. So I'm happy to go with it, Chair, and I think it is going to be fun. Let's just remember it's about the election. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hughes.
I'm sorry to go back to this subject, and this is a proposal. I propose that we strike the mention of the individual wards from section 2.5.
Can I just make this point? Are you trying to amend the recommendation?
Yes.
Okay.
And I would prefer it to read, make reference to the local development plan. So I would suggest that specific wards are taken out, that we continue to use the words up until that point, but add in a reference to the local development plan.
Right, okay, can I just go back on this? The recommendations are item 1 and 2, as you will see on the front, which says that the review of the District Council's electoral arrangements by the Local Government Boundary Commission is welcomed, and secondly, that the report at key stages of the review are presented to the committee in due course with all proposals requiring a formal response from the District Council being formulated by the Council itself. So what amendment to those recommendations are you making, please?
Okay, well I want to make a recommendation to the referred to document.
Then obviously that is not the point. That is not a recommendation. The recommendation has been proposed and seconded of those items that you see in front of you, and the only amendment can be made to those recommendations that are there. So I can take that obviously this is not what you're required to do at this time.
I would. I want to amend the detail.
The detail is not there for the detail is not there for amending. When we come to proposals, it's what the proposals are as recommendations, and it has been proposed as the recommend stance on here. Are you changing your amendment?
I will withdraw my proposed amendment, but I would like to it minuted that I would prefer that the words, the references in section 2.5 to the 3 wards are removed when it comes to the defining the terms of reference to this particular activity, and instead a reference to the local development plan is included.
Chair, it's not the role of members to rewrite officers' reports. It's the role of members to determine whether they agree with the recommendations contained within those reports. What Councillor Hughes has just put forward is not a modification to any of the recommendations.
So I move back to the fact. Councillor Slack, is this a comment?
Yes, I think same as Paul said, it started with a blank piece of paper. We've all got different things in different wards. As it increases, but same as Paul said already, we started with a blank piece of paper. So I think I support the mover and seconder on this issue. Thank you, Chair.
Well, we'll find that out now. It's been moved and seconded. All in favour, please show.
A 14
for and 2 against. Against, sorry.
Yeah.
Abstain. Are you against? That proposal's been moved. Item 8, review of polling places.
Thank you, Chair. In an ideal world, this review would have come after the one that you've just been talking about, but it's on a statutory timetable, so that's not possible. The report sets out the process for the review, and I think it's fairly self-explanatory. The imperatives in the guidance really are that the council seek to ensure that local authority area have such that voters in the local authority area have such reasonable facilities for voting as are practicable in the circumstances, and that the local authority seek to ensure that so far as is reasonable and practicable, every polling station for which it is responsible is accessible to electors who are disabled. We have 92 polling stations in Derbyshire Dales currently, and it's really a plea for your help in conducting this review, because there are some areas where we've got concerns at the moment about the viability of the stations going forward. We'd like to stop using as many schools as possible because of the disruption that causes to the schools. And we've got a few that are properties in private ownership where they're not ideal because the sort of future of them is not guaranteed going forward. So we will be contacting everybody individually, but we'd like you to sort of put the word out to anyone who's interested. And I'm particularly interested in hearing about disabled representative groups who we might consult, if you can let me have details of any of those that you know locally. I think, and that about covers it at the moment actually. If you can ask, your parish councils as well, we will consult them. There's a list of people who we consult, but disabled groups, parish councils, MPs, county councillors, they'll all get individual letters, but I just ask that you do provide information. You may know of places that are better than the polling stations we've got now that we don't know about, and if we can have that information, that'll help us to get the best out of this that we can.
Any questions? Councillor Purdy.
It's not a question, George. A question, Councillor Slack.
Yes, question. My question is that with the increase in postal voting, will it have a bearing on this review?
Postal votes are increasing slowly, but I think we've sort of hit a bit of a plateau now. We're at about 10,000 as a general, in the general scheme of things. If we have a general election, that might go up, or if it's an election in a holiday period, we get more temporary ones. But the permanent postal votes sit at around 10,000 and don't seem to be increasing a great deal at the moment.
Councillor Rattle, question?
Mr. Chair, I don't want to be presumptuous, Chris, but as a long-standing agent, election agent for parliamentary district, council, town, parish, you name it, will I be consulted as to my views on?
Yes.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Thank you very much. Because I do have that sense.
Councillor Purdy.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to support the plea by Chris, 2 members. Some of you know your areas very well. I'm sure, notwithstanding the fact you're new councillors, you should still know your area very well, so I think you'll have an advantage that would help Chris. I'd just be really pleased to give some ideas, because this is all about equality and diversity and helping the disabled. We do have some polling stations that are not manageable for such people, so thank you. I'd move the recommendation.
Question?
Thank you, Chair. Just wondering if we've had any feedback from the electorate through various feedback channels that we have into electoral locations. Is it something that's seen as a problem, or seems to be okay, or just any feedback you received?
We did a survey at the district and parish election. We have roving presiding officers who go out, and they take about 20 stations, and they did a survey of the facilities available in each station and identified any problems, and that information will be used as part of the review. The presiding officers all have a sheet where they can record any problems, and we obviously monitor those. I'm not aware of any complaints that we've had in specific to the recent elections.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Right, Councillor Purdy, I take it that you proposed.
Yes, fine.
Have we got a second? No. Councillor Donnelly, thank you. So it's been proposed and seconded. Has anybody got any more comments to make on this? Councillor Hughes.
I'd just like to compliment the council officers on the way in which the polling stations are manned. It's always a very pleasant place to go on polling day. Thank you very much.
So it has been proposed and seconded. All in favour? Against? Thank you. That's been passed. Thank you. Item 9. The CCTV system, a revised code of practice. Ash, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. A brief report for the benefit of new members. In January of last year, the Community Environment Committee approved funding for the purchase and implementation of a new CCTV system across the district. Compromises of 43 cameras. As part of that, we reviewed the policies and guidance that were in place. Following doing that, in May we had the introduction of GDPR and the impact of that. We've since been learning lessons from that and what others have been doing, and this policy is simply a revised code of practice to deal with the CCTV system in place.
Any questions? Okay. I move to debate. Councillor Hill.
No real debate, just happy to move this. Unfortunate necessity that we need, but we're very much proactive in the report.
Is that by the seconder? Councillor. Thank you. Anybody wishing to speak? Councillor Ratcliffe.
Yes, thank you, Chair. We have debated CCTV systems across the district on a number of previous occasions, and I think all of us accept that they do provide assistance, and even if reluctantly, I think we all accept that they are something of a necessary presence there. However, I would like to feel that even within the council policies, and essentially that's what we're doing, we are adopting now something that will form this council's policy towards CCTV, that there is a recognition that technology is advancing. I was struck very recently by articles on facial recognition systems that are being employed in CCTV networks. Now it seems to me that what we have to acknowledge and take cognizance of is that technical sophistication in the future might itself become a threat to our libertarian values and our civil rights. Now, I don't think we've reached that tipping point yet. However, I think we just need to acknowledge it and be on our guard for future policy adoption. That we don't just say, oh yeah, you know, this is a good thing, and we've got used to it, and therefore we'll accept it. Incidentally, I was going to ask a question, and I'm not sure it's a question that can be answered, but I'll take a stab on it. I was very interested in the paragraph 2.1 that gave us a very precise number, 43 camera units located in our town centres there. I wonder how many private and commercial CCTV units are operating in addition to those 43. In other words, you know, when the public go out there, is it just ourselves? Is it just our cameras that are tracking people? I think not. And I'd like to have some awareness just how many are putting us on videotape. However, these are just thoughts.
Can I bring Ashley back into this? Just to clear
Thank you,
this
Chair.
point up?
I don't know the number of cameras that are out there, as you point out, cameras that are out there. What I would say is that they are for a different purpose. In terms of the system that we use, it meets a required specification, so if evidence is required in court, the quality of the image and the manner in which it is recorded has to be of a certain specification. And I'm aware that not all premise or retail cameras meet those specifications, but we have a system that is designed to do that.
Thank you for your response, Ash. The intention and purpose might be different, but they are performing the same function. They are monitoring you in a public space, these cameras.
I think at the end of the day, this report though,
Yes.
Councillor Ratcliffe, is regards our own CCTV system and how the staff view it, and the code of conduct to be legal and compliant with the law as it stands.
I support this, Chair.
Okay, thank you.
10 years ago, I voted to put £8,000 into the thing, so I'm not a detractor.
No, thank you.
Is anyone seconding it?
Okay, Councillor Mark Ratcliffe. Wakeman, please, sorry.
Yes, Chair. Is there any chance of this being beamed over to the police station so they don't have to wait till a Monday morning to view?
Just to come back on that point, Chair, just to be clear with members, the system that we operate is a record and review. It's not monitored in live terms. And currently we are the data owners of the CCTV system and the footage. We do work with the police, and you'll see from the report there have been a number of instances of where the police have used the footage for successful prosecutions. That's not just petty crime, but also some serious crimes. We do work very closely with the police with it. As it stands at the moment, the police don't have direct access to that. It is something that we're looking to work on for the future, but given the guidance and legislation around data sharing, we have to be compliant.
Thank you for that. Councillor Purdy.
If I may, Chair, just trying to help Councillor Ratcliffe and Councillor Wakeman, I've already taken this issue linked to the police station with Karen Poyser, and it is something on our radar. Councillor Ratcliffe, I have to tell you that I was very closely involved with putting all the CCTV into Chesterfield Royal Hospital when I was the security advisor, when data protection was really high on the agenda. You might be interested to know that the reason this law came about was the fact that a stall owner used to film ladies undressing in his market stall, and he got found out, so hence this kind of legislation came out. It's one of the most heavily legislated, closely scrutinised pieces of kit one can imagine with the Data Protection Act and RIPA, the Regulation of Investigative Powers Act. So yes, we are filmed everywhere we go, but there are very strict guidelines as to how that film can be used. Thank you.
Any more questions upon this? Do I find a proposer for this recommendation? And seconder?
No.
Councillor Wakeman. It's been proposed by Councillor Chapman, seconded by Councillor Wakeman. All in favour? Thank you. That's been moved. Item 10, capital programme bid for Microsoft Exchange software. Karen.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
This report is for a business case relating to Microsoft Exchange software. Paragraph 1.1 of the report explains that Microsoft Exchange is the software that we use to manage emails and calendars for both members and officers. The current version is due to expire in terms of support from Microsoft, and because of security risks, we can't move ahead with an unsupported system. Section 2 of the report describes the options that we considered for its replacement, with paragraph 2.5 showing the cost comparison over 5 years. The new software would actually be supported for 10 years by Microsoft, but we've taken a 5-year period for the cost comparison to be proven. The report concludes that option 1 will meet the Council's requirements at the lowest cost over 5 years. I think after 3 years it becomes the lowest cost. Key arrangements are set out in paragraph 4.2 of the report. We do have some funding available in paragraph, some funding available in the ICT reserve, but the Council's financial regulations mean that we can't spend on a scheme that isn't in the revenue budget or the capital programme. So we're asking members here to approve the business case and ask Council to add this into the capital programme. The business case has been considered and approved by the corporate leadership team, and the implementation will be carried out by the ICT service. For new members, I'm not sure if you're aware, but our ICT is provided as part of a partnership with Derbyshire Dales District Council, North East Derbyshire District Council and Bolsover District Council. I have been asked why we didn't do this as a joint procurement, and the reason why we didn't is, first of all, there were slightly different termination dates for the software support expiring, but also what we're proposing is to enter onto a framework agreement that's a pan-government framework, so it doesn't matter whether you enter as an individual council or as a group, it's the same price.
Thank you. Questions? Councillor Slack.
Thank you, Chair. 2 questions, Karen. Will this new system be announced, and will it be cost effective, working with Chesterfield Borough Council? Beg your pardon, North East Derbyshire Bolsover.
I think you might be referring to the next report about the...
Yeah.
Councillor Hughes.
I've got two questions. The first is about savings in operating costs as a result of potentially moving to an outsourced service. A number of the options here are to purchase Microsoft Exchange as a service rather than as a piece of software. Would there be any savings from moving to in terms of operating costs from moving to a service as opposed to running it on our own server? And can I ask my second question as well, because it's a very straightforward one. Does the purchase of this software preclude any move to other paperless office type of environments in the future?
I think the answers to those questions might be covered in section 3 of the report, where it mentions that we've looked at moving to the cloud as an option, and in 3.3 it says that that buying this doesn't preclude that in the future.
Okay, but in terms of the operating costs, I mean, you haven't got any server costs here. You've only got the software costs. Were there any server costs as well?
This is to replace existing software, and we've already got service that runs on.
Councillor Hughes, can I just point you to the item and just read the agenda, because I think you've got yourself confused with the next item about working together, because this is a software update. So I just need you. Councillor Allison, thank you.
I'm just looking at the table of the cost comparisons. You've got Exchange server upgrade, basically, going to 2019, and then you're comparing it to Microsoft Office 365. Basically, with Microsoft Office 365, you're buying in a service, and it's actually a much bigger product than the Exchange server would give you. I'm not disagreeing with the recommendations in the report, but would you, going forward, be considering the benefits that Microsoft Office 365 will bring to the organisation, and how that will be offset against the annual cost because of the reduced IT support costs that the organisation would incur?
The ICT service has already given some consideration to Office 365, but at the moment they don't think that it's right for the council. They've not considered all the security aspects of it, and that's what's concerning them. I mean, you can see from the cost that it would cost considerably more to move to Office 365. So, as you say, we need to look then to see what we say.
For me, it's about doing that cost-benefit analysis to the organisation. I'm looking at this, and all I'm seeing is that you're not comparing like for like. The functionality that you get with Microsoft Office 365 is far outweighs what you get with Exchange.
But it's one of the things that's concerning us is the security of the data.
Okay. Microsoft Office 365 is probably one of the most secure services that you can buy.
I mean, the ICT managers said that buying this doesn't preclude us using Office 365. This is just a one-off cost, and we can in the future. The option is there to move to Office 365 when we feel that's appropriate.
Yeah. I think from my point of view, that's what
Thank
I'd
you.
like to
Thank
see.
you, Councillor Allison. Are there any more questions? Councillor Purdy, is this a question?
No, Chair, but Councillor Allison, we do have a joint committee with ICT with North East Derbyshire, and I'll take on board the point when we go to next meeting.
Thank you. No more questions, then we lead into debate. Have we got anybody to propose this motion? Councillor Ratcliffe.
It's a very quick comment, Chair, but having worked closely with the IT manager who looks and oversees this three-way partnership, I've every faith in him and that it will have made a very careful assessment that's led to this recommendation, so I do support it. And since it may be my only opportunity this evening, I'd like to move this report. But I do so with a question of a personal nature. having, as I say, worked for a number of years in this partnership, representing this authority on the joint ICT, I was quite saddened to see that my group were excluded this year and we have no representation. I would have thought you would value that. So I'd like to know at some point, as a side issue, if you like, why it is that we are not included.
I have no knowledge, Chair, and I think that's a matter for discussion outside this committee.
Absolutely, but I'd like to know.
Thank you for bringing it to attention.
Thank you for bringing that up, and obviously it will be noted, and we'll look into that. Do I find a seconder for this? Councillor Hughes. Anybody else wishing to speak? Yes, Councillor.
Can I just make a comment in seconding it?
Yeah.
And that is that I think the on-cost of continuing with the Microsoft Exchange server should be taken into consideration. I think this is, I'm sure this is the right decision, but I don't think all the costs associated with that service are included in the report.
Anybody else wishing to speak? Okay, it's been moved and seconded for the recommendation. All in favour? Thank you. That's been passed. Item 11, review of the Revenue and Benefit Service. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you, Chair. Since 2010, the Revenues and Benefit Service has been provided by an external company, Electoral. And as it says in the report, they provide that service for Derbyshire Dales District Council and for Chesterfield Borough Council. Most of the staff are located in Chesterfield, with a couple of members of staff based here mainly to deal with housing benefit inquiries. The current contract with Electoral and Derbyshire Dales is due to expire in October 2020, so we need to plan now for what to do when that comes to an end to make sure that there's a seamless transition and no service disruption. This report sets out the work that we've undertaken to date and our recommendations for what will happen after October 2020. So section 1.1 of the report sets out the service objectives. I do need to correct an error on the second bullet point under 1.1 where it says that the objectives include processing claims for universal credit, housing benefit, etc. Our team don't actually process claims for universal credit, that's done at the job centres. So if you could please strike that from your reports. Paragraph 1.2 shows that the service is provided in 5 distinct areas. Council tax collection, business rates collection, administration of housing benefits and council tax support, sundry debtors or accounts receivable, collecting money that's owed to the council, and finally payments of creditors and other things such as grants. Just to give it a bit of context, as it says in 1.3, the service is delivered currently by 33 employees. Not all of those are full-time on Derbyshire Dales contract, because one of the aims of the service when we moved to join up with Chesterfield and Electoral was to get some resilience within the service. So quite a lot of members of staff now do work for both Derbyshire Dales and Chesterfield Borough, and that particularly applies to the senior managers and also to some of the technical experts, the people who know the nitty-gritty of council tax or business rates regulations. So those tend to be shared, and that's where we get the best value for money. Section 2 of the report covers the performance. So since we went into the contract in 2013, it has run successfully. All the key performance indicators have been met. We have monthly meetings with the Bartow management to discuss any issues, and they've generally been very flexible. For example, they've taken on board new functions such as administering the new empty homes premium without requiring additional payment. There's also, in addition to the monthly management meetings, we have strategic board meetings every 6 months, where members of the council also get the opportunity to review performance. Some KPIs have even been improved during the contract. So Avato have enhanced the performance by making things more efficient and streamlined, and that's meant that, for example, the housing benefit key performance indicator was originally to process new claims within 28 days. That was renegotiated a couple of years ago to be within 24 days. So you might say 4 days isn't very much, but if you're a benefit claimant waiting for then 4 days is a lot. And since then, I'm pleased to say, achievement's been improved even further. So it's run quite well up to now. Information about the service and performance is set out in section 2 of the report, where I've tried to give you some statistical information as well to let you know and give you a bit more context to it. Section 3 of the report covers some benchmarking. We did benchmarking with through the Rural Services Network against other similar district councils, and the results of that are shown in Appendix 1 to the report. And we tried to compare council tax and business rates collection with other Derbyshire authorities, and that's shown in Appendix 2 of the report. So you can see the results there. I think you can see, if you look at particularly Appendix 1, you might say for some of the things that the council listened to at the top end, this isn't in the upper quartile. But what you need to realise is that to get in the upper quartile would probably mean a lot more cost being incurred. And so for that reason, we haven't been able to throw too much money at it. But having said that, as I've said, Avato have improved, and they've also made improvements since that data, which was the 2017-18 data. So, section 6 of the report describes an options appraisal that we undertook to look at some options for what we'll do after 2020. The 4 options are set out in paragraph 6.2. So they included to return the full service in-house to Derbyshire Dales, to go into a partnering arrangement with Chesterfield Borough Council, to outsource the contract, so to do another procurement exercise on the open market, or the final option, to have a hybrid between taking some elements back in-house and using partnering with Chesterfield Borough for the others. The considerations for each option, the advantages and disadvantages, are shown in Appendix 3 to the report. Our recommendation is that we should proceed with a hybrid of taking some elements of the service back in-house. That is definitely sundry debtors and possibly accounts payable as well. And partnering with Chesterfield Borough Council for the other services, so council tax, business rates, administration of housing benefits and council tax support. We feel that this will give the minimum service disruption to customers and to staff. If members approve that approach, the next steps are set out in section 7 of the report. Chesterfield Borough Council have confirmed that they're willing to lead in a partnering arrangement, and they feel that it could be delivered at no more than the current cost. They're hoping that savings and efficiencies can be made. A partnering arrangement will give Derbyshire Dales the ability to share in any efficiency savings, subject to the contractual agreement. So we feel that this is the best way forward. It will minimise disruption to staff and customers with no increase in costs. Staff will be protected from either 2P arrangements, whether they transfer to Derbyshire Dales or then subsequently to Chesterfield Borough. The review has been carried out by myself and Rob Huggins, Head of Housing, and we're both happy to try to answer your questions.
Thank you, Karen, for that. Okay, questions, members? Councillor Solid.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question about the staff. The staff will be located in Chesterfield. Will there still be Derbyshire Dales staff? Or would they eventually turn to Chesterfield Board staff?
At the moment, there are about 2 employees. So, do you want to deal with the 2 females?
Thank you. Through you, Chair. It gets very complicated, and the 2P regulations will find that anyone that was a Derbyshire Dales employee that was transferred to Avato, there are Avato employees, but they're still under our terms because they're entitled to have the same terms. So what the proposal most probably would be, and we will get proper advice to make sure we do this properly, is when the staff transfer back to us, they'll come back on Derbyshire Dales terms. If any of those staff are then going into the arrangement with that's not going to be retained here and going to Chesterfield, they'll then be transferred over to Chesterfield, but they'll still be on Derbyshire Dales terms. Unfortunately, to comply with the legislation, it will mean a transfer back and then transfer over. But as I say, we will get experts to make sure it's all done legally, properly, and the staff are not disadvantaged in any way. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions? Councillor Slack.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question. Are the same terms for Chesterfield Borough Council and Derbyshire Dales? Are this not good terms?
Without looking at it in detail, I understand that being that they'll be roughly similar, but that doesn't always mean the same. Things like flexi and legal time that might be different, but most of the terms for local authorities are on a national basis.
Councillor Cruz.
Thank you, Chair. It's a comprehensive report, so I really appreciate that. Thank you. In Appendix 1, I'm just wondering if there's an opportunity to push for an improvement as we go through these changes. Noting the housing benefit claims are quite significant, I think, for Derbyshire Dales. So we're running at 20 days for new claims, and there's some other areas that are running at 15, I think, is the number of single places like instead. Is there any learning we can get? I know you said it's costs, that sounds like you need to put more people in. Is there any process improvements?
I think there are process improvements, and Avato have already implemented some. So Appendix 1 is based on 2017-18 data. There was an improvement in 18-19, and I think, if I'm right, I've just had the results for the first quarter of this year, and I'm sure it was around 12 days. There was a massive improvement. Avato have been below their target, and significantly below their target in the past. But at the moment, the way the contract's worded is if they don't meet a KPI, they incur a financial penalty. So while they've done their best, because the benefits manager is very customer focused, so he's done his best to deliver as quickly as possible. But they've been reluctant to change the actual KPIs within the agreement, just in case there's a disaster. One of the things we're going to discuss with Chesterfield is what we're going to do about the KPIs. Because there's a balance to be drawn as to whether you have KPIs with penalties, or if you're just partnering, are you a bit more relaxed about the KPIs, but you might have something else, like you're sharing the profits, or you could be a bit more flexible. Certainly it should be easy to change KPIs as it goes forward in any arrangement.
Thank you. Councillor Hughes. Your question's been answered. Councillor Purdy.
Thank you, Chair. Well, it doesn't seem long, does it, Councillor Ratcliffe, since we sat here with trepidation and listened to the Avato officers on the handover. And here we are with a new position. But I think it's a sensible, pragmatic approach, and I agree with the recommendation, Karen, on the hybrid in-house. And in effect, what we are doing, we're allowing you officers to move forward to the next stages, which you've clearly laid out. I think our concerns are always with the staff, so I hear what Councillor Salt says, and I'm comfortable that the survey with the staff shows a strong preference for some of the debtors, which indicates to me we're happy with the work we're doing. So I'm happy to move recommendation, Chair.
I second this on that, Chair, but I want to make a comment if I may.
Councillor
As
Ratcliffe,
part
you
of
may.
the seconding.
Thank you. I fully agree with what you're saying, Gary, and I think, you know, we don't realise sometimes what a great service we've had from Arvato. They've been outstanding. They have not only met KPI targets, but in most cases, they've exceeded them. And I'm particularly grateful for their approach towards benefits and universal credit in particular. One of the things I always find with Karen's reports is that not only detailed, but they never shy away from making comments that I think need picking up and sometimes amplifying in debate. You know, this point that she makes in paragraphs 2.2 and 2.3, I think, are worthy of proper digestion. The universal credit, she remarks, will ultimately adversely affect processing times for council tax support. It's no fault of our own, but we're doing our best to meet those challenges. And I hope that the new service will keep that very much in the forefront of their thoughts, because I think, you know, we have a duty not only to, how can I put it, bring in money, but also to help with the financial support of residents who live within our district who are in vulnerable circumstances. And the one thing I've always picked up from Arvato is that they are sympathetic. They have an sympathetic ear. That's not to say that they are they fail in their duty of care, financial care and probity, but they and indeed our own benefits and housing section here have always struck me as being willing to listen and to help where they possibly can. And let's hope that long continues.
Thank you for that, Councillor Ratcliffe. Are there anybody else who wishes to speak? Then it's been proposed and seconded. All in favour for the recommendation?
Through you, Chair, just to mention, could it be noted that the reference to the universal credit is included in the minutes in case any member of the public is reading it and see that that's been deleted from the report?
Thank you for that. Item 12. Derbyshire Dales Safeguarding Policy. Ash, sorry.
Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, I think.
Again, a brief report. This is a renewal of the District Council's Safeguarding Policy. We're asking members to approve the policy that's been put in front of them. Also to approve for me as Head of Community Environmental Services as Delegated Officer for Safeguarding, and that also that the training for safeguarding is mandatory for members going forward. We will do the training in the form of workshops. There are 3 planned, one of which, well, the first one starts on Monday, the 15th of July, followed by the second one on the 9th of September and again on the 23rd of October. Just for clarity, they are not, it's not a series of workshops, they are the same workshop, it just gives members the opportunity to attend on 3 different days. The purpose of the policy is to help members and staff understand their role in safeguarding for the organisation, help them identify potential safeguarding issues and what to do if they receive an allegation that relates to safeguarding, or if they identify an issue that could result in a safeguarding investigation. What I'd also like to stress is, although that the District Council's role is key and pivotal in many ways in identifying safeguarding instances, it is a very small role that we play in a very long process. We do take part in multi-agency approach towards safeguarding, but ours is very much the initial report of safeguarding, either receiving it or identifying it, and then working with our partners at the County Council and the police. I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you, Ash. Are there any questions? Councillor Rowe.
I've got several questions and several comments. Please bear with me.
Questions only, please, and we're limited to 3. Thank you.
Okay. Can I just give you a bit of background?
No, sorry, questions.
I hear you, but I want to do the... Okay.
Sorry,
okay.
that's in debate.
My name is Claire Rowe. I'm an HPC registered social worker. This is my core business, and I want to assist the council to make sure we get this right. My fundamental question is, I have read your policy. I am not clear, I am not confident that it's compliant with Care Act legislation in terms of its reference to making safeguarding personal. I think there's several key things. It's not compliant with Derbyshire's Safeguarding Board policy. I'm quite happy to work with you on that, but I think there's several things we need to do in terms of questions we need to ask when we're reporting a safeguarding. We need to go back to the person first. In terms of the process stuff on that flow diagram, I think there's some tweaks that we need to do. I'm quite happy to work with you on it, but I do think there's some things that we need to do. It needs to be Care Act compliant. One of the things that I see is key for us as a district council is that officers have an understanding of VARM, the vulnerable adult process, and how those meetings occur. Officers also need to have training, and councillors, in case we get asked to do a Section 42 report, which is a detailed report if a safeguarding incident's taken place in our organisation. I also think that we need to make members and council members aware that safeguarding includes domestic violence, and any training we do needs to, the legislation in terms of safeguarding also considers domestic violence, and when we're looking at our core business and housing and things like that, that might be something, we've just been talking about CCTVs, it might be something that we come across as in our role. So, as it stands at the moment, as somebody who's HPC registered, I couldn't support the current policy, but I'm quite happy to do some work on it with you to tweak it and get it right. So it's not a question, it's more of a comment. Would you like some help to get this more compliant? I'm willing to work with you as a critical friend with a professional understanding of safeguarding and the legal processes.
If I may come back, Chair, absolutely, we certainly welcome some input into this. What I would say is obviously safeguarding.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I appreciate that.
However, the policy has come out of work that we've done with the Derbyshire Safeguarding Board, and as you can imagine, most local authorities, we share information between ourselves when we're reviewing our policies and procedures. No point reinventing the wheel. So a lot of this has come. So I would certainly be interested in taking any points on board, especially given you're saying it's not compliant, and I wonder if it's worth deferring the item to a further committee.
I think it's the making safeguarding personal, it's the adult bit, and that's what we need to focus on.
Thank you for bringing that point forward. Just let me check on where we stand with that.
Well, through you, Chair, if it's a matter of, in effect, a new motion to defer this matter, I would, however, say if members are minded to that, whether or not they would wish to actually pass the issue of the safeguarding training as mandatory through committee and defer the other matters on for a further report, if that's fair.
We'll carry on with questions just for now. Councillor Purdy.
I'll defer to questions, members, but I want to make a motion moving.
Anybody else want to make any comments? So I go back to yourself, Councillor Raw. Upon that, would you like to make any recommendations as regards the proposal to this? As regards amending?
By the 1st of September.
Absolutely, I'm willing to prioritise some time next week or whatever. I think it only needs an hour to go through it. We just need to make some references to the Care Act and make it Care Act compliant. And I'd also like to have a discussion about the training, because the training's got specific purpose. Mentioning the bits about Section 42 reports, and so people have got an understanding of harm and domestic violence as well.
So upon those comments, are you asking for a referral of this? Is this
I don't think there's a need to. I think if the officers, if members are willing from me and Ashley to work together and perhaps just go through it perhaps with legal and just make a few tweaks and bring it back. I don't think Paul's got a view on this.
Chair, could I make a suggestion to help members? Clearly from what Councillor Ross said, she can bring her professional knowledge to this particular area. But I'm detecting that perhaps the majority of the policy is pretty much agreed with the tweaks that Councillor Ross has suggested. So can I suggest that in order to make sure we get the policy in place by the 1st of September, which is an audit requirement, that we delegate authority to Ash as the head of service in consultation with Councillor Raw to make the amendments that are necessary in order that we can achieve that deadline.
Councillor Purdy.
Thank you. I agree with Mr Wilson's suggestion. I defer to your expertise, Councillor Raw, and I trust Ash will meet with you, but I would insist that whatever goes between Ash and Councillor Raw is brought back for the benefit of this committee to see if there are any areas that need improvement or we've got wrong, because I do defer to Ash and expertise with the Safeguarding Board, which it's come from, so I've got a bit of a problem at the moment who's right. So I don't, not where you're coming from, please, but I think that, I think we'd like to get this policy through, so I'm going to move it, Chair. I hope it's supported in the knowledge that Ash will meet with Councillor Raw, but I would like feedback, please, as to where the points picked up are either wrong or need addressing.
Is the making...
Excuse me, Councillor Raw, I haven't...
Okay.
I'm going to... I'll leave it.
Chair, if it would be sensible to have, in effect, the amendment as suggested by Mr Wilson, and then the matter be brought back as a noted report for this committee, so you can all be updated next time.
Yeah, that's what I'm suggesting.
Yeah.
Councillor Raw, I'll bring you back in now. Thank you.
It was just to say, I think it's pulling that golden thread through the document of the Care Act in terms of adults and of making safeguarding personal, and our responsibilities around talking to individuals before we report it.
Thank you. So upon that, if there are nobody else who wants to discuss this, the recommendations now state that the new safeguarding policy is approved and implemented by the 1st of September, that the head of Community Environment Services be delegated to be the safeguarding officer, and that training in safeguarding is classed as mandatory to all councillors, plus an amendment to delegate back to Ash to work alongside with Councillor Raw to pick up the points that she'd made in the report that she feels that on her expertise aren't quite as said, and then this is actually brought back as a note of policy to another meeting. Do I find a proposal?
I'm happy with that proposal to move it.
You're happy with that proposal? You're seconding it, Councillor Darley? All in favour of that proposal? Thank you. Item 13, Procurement Strategy Update 2018 to 21.
Thank you, Chair. Basically, this is the update on the action plan that's referred to in the Procurement Strategy. It's to identify and raise awareness to new members also of the strategy aims to reflect the Council's initiatives to make the procurement processes compliant with our contract standing orders, but also to ensure that our processes are as easy and understandable for members of the public and council officers as well. As you'll see from the report, I've identified that there has been a £20,000 saving target, an annual target, and as identified in the report, it shows that we've exceeded that. I would like to raise that this outcome is set in the vision for procurement could not be achieved without the continued support of the procurement hub. They've been key in importing and sharing knowledge and good practice to make sure that these actions are met and our procurement processes are improved. And as you'll see from the savings, we've exceeded the target, but this is just improved by good governance in our procurement processes. So whilst we're improving on processes as well, we're actually achieving savings and making sure that we're accountable for the money spent.
Thank you for that. Are there any questions? Then I would like to take it to debate.
In that case, I'll move the motion, Chairman.
I'll second it, Chair, but I want to make a comment.
Make a comment, Councillor Ratcliffe.
Thank you again. Paragraph 1.5. Commitment to £20,000 saving per annum. Yeah, okay. I agree with that in essence, though I raise concerns when I think it's necessary, and I do challenge, the climate and culture of austerity that seems to have crept into this council's general ethos. No fault of its own, I've no doubt, but it's detectable. I think in procurement, generally, we need to be thinking of other issues too. We have the green agenda now on our plate that we need to be considering. We have equality issues that have been raised before that, believe it or not, enter into procurement. We have our commitment to fair trade that not only is my town a member of, but Matlock here is a very notable certificate holder for fair trade. So there's a broad range of things that come into procurement other than just getting things for the lowest cost, even if the best value is looked at, and I'm not denying it isn't. So I just wanted to make that sort of comment. So I'm happy with the report. I note that we're making savings, but I still have these thoughts in the back of my head that perhaps in the future, and I have put it on as a marker, that we start to review our approach to spending, a sort of reprioritisation of financial commitment, I'm calling it.
Thank you. Are there any other comments? Then I take it it's been proposed and seconded. All in favour, please show. Thank you. It's removed. Item 14, Internal Audit Annual Report.
Thank you, Chair. I'm presenting this report on behalf of the Internal Audit Manager, Jenny Williams, who wrote the report. She's not able to attend this evening. So this report relates to the work done by Internal Audit during 2018-19. For new members, I'd explain that Internal Audit is an independent service who objectively examine and evaluate and report to Council on the adequacy of the controlled environment. If members want to know more about the role of Internal Audit, that will be covered in the finance training that I'll be giving next week on the 17th of July at 4 o'clock, so little plug for that. In terms of this report, section 2 gives the summary of the work undertaken and shows that 19 audit reports were issued in 2018-19, which is an increase on 2017-18. That doesn't necessarily mean that a lot more work was done. Different audits require different numbers of days, and we have, for the benefit of new members again, we have an audit plan that sets out which audits we feel will take place in each year and how many days they might take. And that was approved at the last cycle of committees. The table in 2.1 also shows that of the reports issued in 2018-19, 10 gained a substantial assurance, 6 a reasonable assurance, 2 limited assurance, and 1 inadequate assurance. And I'll come back to those in a bit. Paragraph 2.2 highlights that Internal Audit didn't find any cases involving fraud, which I'm pleased to say. Paragraph 2.3 summarises the performance indicators that the Internal Audit section has. They carried out all the audits that were planned for the year, and they did that at slightly less than the budgeted cost, because I think there was a vacancy partway through the year that was subsequently filled. You might see indicators showing the number and proportion of audits completed within the time allocation was less than we expected, and I think that reflects the audit reports that had limited and inadequate assurance. So what the 74% reflects is that some audits took a lot longer than were planned, and that was because of the findings. More work was needed and was planned for. And the final thing in that table shows that 97% of recommendations that were due to be implemented by 31st of March were actually implemented. And in fact, that means that only one recommendation was outstanding. 22 recommendations from 2018-19 are due to be implemented during 2019-20, and we'll be bringing a future report back to members to keep an eye on those and make sure they're implemented. Section 3 of the report covers the opinion on adequacy and effectiveness of the controlled environment. The Internal Audit Manager is required to give an independent view on whether she feels the controls that we have are adequate, and in 3.2 you can see that she's giving you that assurance that she feels they are. Although that is slightly qualified in 3.3 by saying assurance can never be absolute. In 3.5, it refers again to the 2 limited assurance reports. They were on procurement and the leisure contract, and the 1 inadequate report on the depot inventory and procurement. These are all covered in a further report later on the agenda, where full details are being provided. Section 4 of the report highlights that those reports that were inadequate and they should be mentioned in the annual governance statement. Members might recall that you actually approved the annual governance statement on the 30th of May at the council meeting, and those items were reflected in the statement and in its action plan. The audit review is required to say whether internal audit complied with standards, the public sector internal audit standards, and paragraph 6.1 confirms that no areas of non-compliance were found. Section 7 of the report looks at the review of the section against the current internal audit charter. So that's a charter that we set ourselves to to set out the standards of internal audit. And again, I'm pleased to say the requirements of the Charter were met. So I'm asking members to approve the annual report. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Karen. Members, questions? Councillor Slack.
Thank you, Chair. My question is one of the red areas account. It's DO18 reference. It's the Department of Inventory and Procurement. Why is it this significant risk at this moment?
The full details of that are covered in the next agenda item, where you've got a copy of the report. So that's in the next item of the agenda.
Next agenda. Thank you.
Any more questions? No questions, okay. Do I find a proposer for the recommendation? Councillor Hugh. Proposer, any seconder? Councillor Chapman. So it's been proposed. Would anybody like to speak on this? The proposers? No? Okay, thank you. So it's been proposed and seconded for the recommendation. All in favour? It's moved, thank you. Item 15, exclusion of press and the public. Well, I think he's already taken leave. But can I ask for somebody to propose that we do exclude members of the public? Councillor Swindle.
Yeah, I propose that, Chair.
Do I find a seconder for that? Councillor Donnelly. All in favour of exclusions?